She accidentally sent the CEO her shopping list, and what he did next left her red-faced. Clara only meant to send the weekly report, but in the middle of a rushed morning, she made the worst mistake of her career. One email, one personal list, one wrong recipient. By lunchtime, the entire building was whispering her name. And not for the right reasons, but when he showed up at her desk holding that paper bag, Clara realized nothing about her life was going to stay quiet anymore. Before we continue, if you enjoy touching and inspiring stories like this one, make sure to subscribe to the channel and leave a like. Now let's get back to the story. Clara Moretti froze. Her heart, already thumping from too much coffee and not enough breakfast, dropped straight into her nude flats. Her cheeks went crimson before she even looked up from her monitor. I was rushing. I thought it was the weekly logistics report, she mumbled. Barely audible. Tasha, her desk partner and only friend on the 14th floor, clutched her chest dramatically, then leaned in closer, whispering behind her takeaway cup of matcha. Girl, you just sent our billionaire CEO a list that includes extra thick sanitary pads and, hold on, chocolate to forget about life? The office around them buzzed with clicks. Phones and the occasional printer were, but for Clara, everything went silent. A slow, dreadful silence. I'm dead, she whispered. Worse, Tasha replied wide-eyed. You're fired. Publicly. In front of everyone. With security escorting you out holding your little lunchbox. Clara's stomach flipped. She had worked at Blakewood & Co. for 2 years, always keeping her head down, always careful. She didn't come from their world, not with her thrifted clothes, student debt, and her shared apartment in a noisy part of town. She had no business messing up like this, especially not with Adrian Blakewood. He was, well, him, CEO, 6 foot something, built like a walking Armani ad, with eyes so gray they looked stormy when he didn't smile, which was always. Clara turned to her monitor and opened the last email she sent. There it was. The attachment wasn't the logistics file, it was her grocery list, with awkward little notes like cheap shampoo, the green bottle, smells like apples, not that awful lavender again, eggs, but only if they're on sale, chocolate, the dark one, the one that makes me feel like I still believe in love, sanitary pads, yep, life is a party, something random from the bakery. Surprise me? Depression. She wanted to dissolve into her ergonomic chair and disappear forever. Just as she reached for her mouse to delete the email thread, her inbox blinked. New message. Adrian Blakewood. She stared, then blinked, then stared again. Tasha peeked over her shoulder, not even pretending to mind her own business. Well? Open it, Clara clicked, and gasped. No subject line, no body text, just a single image. A photo of a brown paper bag. Inside, the exact apple-scented shampoo, a carton of eggs with a 25% off sticker, a glossy dark chocolate bar from that expensive corner store, a package of thick pads, and, wrapped in wax paper, a soft, powdered croissant from the bakery across the street. She covered her mouth with both hands. He bought it? Tasha looked equally shocked. Oh my, is this flirting? Clara shook her head so fast, her old hair clip nearly flew off. No, it's mockery. This is professional death disguised as kindness. And then her eyes fell on the text below the photo. Just 2 words. Lunch today? The office cafeteria was buzzing with lunchtime chatter, but every voice seemed to hush when Adrian Blakewood walked in, sleeves rolled up, eyes sharp, and a humble brown bag in one hand. Clara, who had been trying to decide whether to hide under the salad bar or fake a coughing fit and run home, stood frozen by the vending machine. He spotted her instantly. People parted like a tide. He walked straight to her, calm, unreadable, every step echoing against the polished marble. Miss Moretti, he said, his voice low and smooth. Clara nearly dropped her paper cup. Mr. Blakewood, He raised the bag lightly. I hope I got the right brand. You were quite specific about the apple scent. Her face was on fire. Somewhere behind her, Tasha was mouthing, "Oh my God," in slow motion. I didn't mean to send that. It was a mistake. I'll delete the email, and I understand if—" Adrian tilted his head, cutting her off with a single look. Not unkind, just thoughtful. "I read reports all day," he said, then offered her the bag. "But this was the most honest thing I've seen in weeks." She hesitated, then reached for it with trembling fingers. Thank you, but you didn't have to." "I wanted to." Silence. The kind that made her hear her own breath. He nodded toward the courtyard tables. "There's a quiet spot outside, if you're not too embarrassed to be seen eating chocolate with the enemy." It took every ounce of courage in her to say yes. They sat beneath a maple tree whose leaves were beginning to rust at the edges. The fall breeze tugged softly at her blouse. He pulled out 2 croissants. "You ever notice how sad people forget to eat well?" he asked, unwrapping one. She blinked. "That's why I added the bakery surprise," he said with a small, crooked smile. "Depression shouldn't pick your lunch." Clara laughed, startled by it. A soft, honest laugh she hadn't heard from herself in weeks. "You actually read it." "Every word." "And you're not going to fire me?" He looked up. "For needing shampoo and chocolate?" "No, for being a mess." Adrian's gaze held hers. "We're all messes, Clara. Just some of us can afford better cologne to hide it." Something in her chest shifted, a knot loosened. They ate in gentle quiet for a few minutes. At some point, he reached into the bag again and pulled out one last thing she hadn't seen in the photo. A tiny box. Inside it was a small gold hair clip shaped like a leaf. "It looked like yours might break soon," he said simply. She stared at it. Then at him. "I don't understand. Why are you being kind to me?" Adrian shrugged, breaking off a piece of croissant. "Because no one ever was, when I needed it most." Her eyes watered before she could stop them, and just as she blinked back the tears, a sudden buzz broke the stillness. Tasha burst through the glass door, waving her phone in the air, nearly tripping over the curb. "Clara, you need to see this," she said, breathless, holding up the screen. A blurry photo of Clara and Adrian at the courtyard table was already circling in the company group chat, captioned, "From grocery lists to love lists." Quite. Clara didn't remember standing, or breathing, or how her croissant ended up half-crushed in her palm. Tasha's phone was still glowing in front of her face, a close-up of Clara caught mid-smile, gazing at Adrian Blakewood like he was offering her a glass slipper instead of a paper bag. And he looked at her like he hadn't looked at anyone in the building before. Soft eyes, a subtle, secret grin, the kind that made people assume stories where there were none. "This is bad," Clara whispered. Tasha didn't argue. For once, her voice dropped to something more serious. "You're going to need to get ahead of this." "But it's not this," Clara said, gesturing between herself and the now empty bench where Adrian had sat just moments ago. "There is no this. It was a mistake, an awkward, stupid mistake." "Then get your story straight," Tasha said, "because the company grapevine just crowned you the future Mrs. Blakewood, and corporate rumor weddings move fast." The weight of those words sank deeper than Clara wanted to admit. She couldn't afford whispers. Not in an office like this, not with her history, not when people were always looking for a reason to say she didn't belong. By 2:17 p.m., the entire building knew. By 2:23, the internal chat thread had been mysteriously deleted, which only made everyone more suspicious. And by 3 p.m., Clara's name appeared in an Outlook invitation. Meeting subject, clarification, logistics reports. Attendees, Adrian Blakewood, Clara Moretti. Location, executive conference room. 7A, time 3:15 p.m. She stared at the screen. "Is that code for firing with style?" she asked. Tasha leaned in. That's code for closed doors, rumors exploding. Bring mints just in case. Clara swallowed hard. She reached for her purse, took out a crumpled tissue, and dabbed her forehead. Then, without thinking, pulled her hair clip tighter. The old one. She hadn't dared wear the new gold one yet. It felt too personal, too real. Conference room 7A was like a silent aquarium. Glass walls, muted floors, the soft hum of power. Adrian was already inside, alone. He stood when she walked in, and that small gesture nearly broke her. No boss had ever stood for her. "Miss Moretti," he said, nodding politely. She gave a tiny smile. "Mr. Blakewood." There was a long pause, not cold. Just uncertain. He gestured toward the seat across from him. As she sat, he reached for a folder, but didn't open it. "I assume you've seen the photo." Clara nodded. "Yes, sir. It's everywhere. I had my team take it down, but that doesn't erase it." "No, sir." Another pause. Adrian leaned forward slightly. His sleeves still rolled, watch gleaming under the muted ceiling lights. "Let me ask you something, Clara. Do you believe you've done anything inappropriate?" She blinked. "No, I didn't intend for any of this. The list was personal. It wasn't meant for company eyes, or yours." "But you weren't unprofessional during lunch?" "No." He tilted his head. "And I wasn't either?" "No," she said quickly, maybe a little too quickly. "You were kind, but not inappropriate." He nodded once, as if confirming something to himself. "Then we don't apologize." Clara stared at him. "What?" Adrian opened the folder and pushed a paper toward her, a short company-wide memo. "Drafted and ready. To all staff, kindly be reminded that personal moments between colleagues are not the subject of speculation or gossip. What happened today was a brief and respectful interaction between two professionals. Let's redirect our focus to the work that actually matters." "A. Blakewood." She stared at it, stunned. "You're going to send this?" He leaned back in his chair. "Only if you're comfortable with it." I thought you'd want me to explain myself, or apologize, or for buying you a croissant," he interrupted softly. Her lips parted, but no words came. Adrian folded his hands. "Clara, I've spent years building a reputation for being cold, unreachable, and, well, terrifying." She gave a nervous laugh, and he allowed the corner of his mouth to twitch. "But I'm not going to let gossip decide who I can or cannot share lunch with." Something in her eyes flickered, a mix of fear and relief. "I'm just an assistant," she said, "or you're you. And I was raised by a single mother who knew how to stretch every dollar, who made grocery lists that looked just like yours. You reminded me of her." Clara's throat tightened. That wasn't flirtation. It was something deeper, something rooted in memory and respect. He stood. She stood with him. "I'll send the memo in 1 hour," he said. "Unless you want me to scrap it." She shook her head. "No, it's perfect." Their eyes met for just a second longer than was polite. Then Clara stepped out, back into the corridor, blinking against the brighter light, her heart still racing. And just as she rounded the corner toward her desk, someone bumped into her hard. "Watch it!" snapped a voice. It was Celeste Hargrove, the VP of Public Relations, blonde, sharp, always perfectly tailored, and famously possessive of Adrian's attention. She looked Clara up and down like she was lint. "Careful who you let buy you croissants, dear. Some people forget their place. Others remind them." Without waiting for a reply, she walked off, heels clacking like warning bells. Clara stood frozen for a moment, then sat down at her desk, trying to steady her hands. Inside her bag, the small gold hair clip shifted slightly, catching the light just as her inbox blinked again. New message, Celeste Hargrove. Subject, let's talk. Urgent. Clara hovered over the subject line. Let's talk. Urgent. Her hand rested on her mouse, but she didn't click right away. She didn't need to open the email to know what it contained. Celeste Hargrove didn't write urgent unless she planned to smile while setting something on fire. And Clara could already feel the heat licking at her ankles. Should I forward this to HR or burn it with sage? Tasha whispered, reading over her shoulder as usual. I don't know, Clara murmured. But I've never been so aware of how much I need this job. The email opened with exactly the tone she expected. Polished steel wrapped in satin. Clara, I believe there's been some confusion regarding professional boundaries and the perception of favoritism within our teams. Please stop by my office before you leave today. This shouldn't wait. Celeste Hargrove, VP Communications. No emojis, no warmth, no oxygen. Tasha gave her a side glance. Do you want me to slip a cinnamon roll into your bag for emotional support? Clara almost smiled. Only if it comes with an exit strategy. Celeste's office was pristine, all whites, silvers, and clean lines. A single orchid on the windowsill. A candle that smelled faintly like mint and control. Clara stood at the door, one hand holding the strap of her shoulder bag, like it might float away without her. Miss Moretti, Celeste said smoothly, without looking up from her screen. Sit, Clara did, quietly, carefully, like sitting too loud might get her escorted out. Celeste tapped something on her laptop. Then finally looked up. Her expression was unreadable, practiced. I'm sure you've noticed the chatter today. Clara nodded once. And while the CEO has chosen to respond with an internal memo, which I reviewed before it went out, of course, I'm more concerned with how you will proceed. I didn't intend for any of this, Clara said gently. It was a missend, a personal mistake. Mistakes become headlines, Celeste replied, folding her hands neatly on her desk, especially when the man involved hasn't been seen with a woman in public since the Vogue Gala last spring. Clara's pulse quickened. I'm not trying to be seen with him, she said quietly. Celeste's smile was thin. Good. Then, you won't mind declining the invitation. Clara blinked. What invitation? Celeste reached into a drawer and pulled out a small cream envelope, the kind used for Blakewood Foundation dinners. Arrived for you an hour ago, she said. Apparently, Mr. Blakewood added your name to his guest list. A private table, high donors only. Clara stared at the envelope. I wasn't told. No, Celeste said, voice tightening, but people are watching now, especially the board. And if you attend, it'll confirm everything people are whispering. Clara swallowed. So you're telling me not to go? I'm suggesting, Celeste said, rising slowly, that you remember the difference between being visible and being valued. Clara stood too. I'll think about it. Celeste didn't blink. Do. By the time Clara stepped outside, the sun had begun to dip behind the buildings. The city felt colder than usual, or maybe it was just her. She walked 2 blocks before stopping at a tiny cafe tucked between a shoe store and a dry cleaner, a place she used to come to before work, when she still believed mornings might be kind. She ordered a tomato soup and half a grilled cheese. Not fancy, not viral, just warm, familiar. At a small corner table. She pulled the envelope from her bag and stared at her name printed in calligraphy. Clara Moretti, Blakewood Foundation, Gala Dinner. Table 2. Her thumb traced the letters. Table 2 wasn't just any table, that was his table. She could still hear Celeste's voice in her head, cool, composed, threatening, without a single curse word. And yet, something about Adrian's face that afternoon lingered stronger. The look in his eyes when he said, "We don't apologize." She stirred her soup and bit into the grilled cheese. One of the corners was burnt. The bread was too crunchy. The cheese had cooled, but somehow it tasted like home. Back at her apartment, Clara sat at her tiny kitchen table with the envelope still unopened beside her. Her phone buzzed. Unknown number. Don't let her scare you. You belong there. AB. Clara blinked. Her hands trembled slightly. She looked at the screen for a long time before setting the phone down and reaching for the new gold hair clip she hadn't worn yet. She clipped it gently into place. Then, slowly, carefully, she opened the envelope. Inside was not just the dinner card, but a handwritten note. Wear something you like. No one else matters. Adrian. She pressed her lips together, heart pounding, and let out the tiniest laugh. Nervous, disbelieving. But that moment, that breath, that note, felt like someone had finally said she mattered. Just as she stood up to look in her closet, her phone buzzed again. This time, it wasn't Adrian. It was a group chat notification she hadn't seen before. Subject, PR strategy, the assistant problem, sent by Celeste Hargrove, accidentally included, recipient Clara Moretti. Clara stared at the screen, her name in bold. PR strategy, the assistant problem. The group chat thread, clearly not meant for her, had 5 names attached. Celeste, 2 PR managers, someone from legal, and Adrian's executive scheduler. And now, her, included by mistake. She didn't breathe as she scrolled. Celeste, we need to reframe the narrative before it snowballs. Blakewood seems unaware how fast this is moving. PR manager #1, we could lean into the mentorship angle, take control of the optics. Legal, mentorship doesn't explain the gala invite. Celeste. Then we present her as someone we're elevating. She becomes a company success story, upward mobility, etc. Celeste again. But we make it clear it's still professional. She's not a romantic lead in this story. This is business. Clara's hands were cold. Not a romantic lead, just a narrative. An obstacle. A PR inconvenience dressed up in heels and pearls. She stared down at the open envelope on her table, at Adrian's note. Still there, still real. Wear something you like. No one else matters. But they did matter. They always had. The next morning, Clara arrived earlier than usual. The office was still half asleep. Lights dimmed, printers just warming up. She walked past the elevator and headed straight for the 15th floor. Adrian's assistant, Margot, wasn't at her desk yet. For a moment, Clara hesitated in front of the frosted glass. But she knocked anyway. Once. Firmly. Adrian opened the door himself. Clara? I saw the group chat, she said, voice calm. Celeste accidentally included me, about the gala, about me being a problem. He stepped aside silently, letting her in. The office was clean and quiet, with floor-to-ceiling windows pouring in a soft gray light. Clara stood tall, even if her palms were sweating. I'm not angry, she said. Not really. I just need to know if I'm your guest or your strategy. Adrian didn't answer right away. He walked to the desk, then turned, arms crossed. You were never a strategy, Clara. But I am now. He exhaled. I didn't know she sent that. I've been fighting to keep this simple. There's nothing simple about me being seen next to you at a gala. Adrian, I work in the lowest pay grade on your org chart. He took a step toward her. That list you sent me, he said, it made you human, real. More real than half the board. Clara folded her arms. That's not how they see it. I don't care how they see it. Well, I do, she said, voice rising a notch. Because when they tear someone down in a place like this, they don't start with power. They start with the girl holding the shopping list. Silence stretched between them. Then, quietly, he asked, Do you still want to come with me? Clara hesitated. I don't know, she admitted, but if I do, I want to go as me. Not as your talking point. Adrian nodded once, slowly. Then, you come as you, whatever that looks like. That evening, Clara sat on her bed, staring at the closet. Tasha, barefoot and drinking wine straight from the bottle, flopped beside her. What do you wear when your boss may or may not be walking you into social exile? Clara muttered. I say velvet. Velvet always says, I've seen pain, but I'm surviving with texture. Clara laughed, really laughed, and finally pulled out a deep navy dress she hadn't worn since her cousin's wedding. It was simple, elegant, and still had the tag. She'd bought it during a hopeful moment 2 years ago, then never felt brave enough to wear it. She held it up. Tasha sipped again. Girl, that dress is your mic drop. The Blakewood Foundation Gala was held at a historic rooftop venue in Midtown, all glass and skyline and soft candlelight. Clara stepped out of the car, unsure how her knees were still functioning, and then she saw him. Adrian was waiting by the entrance. No cameras, no reporters, just him. He turned when he saw her, and froze. The navy dress caught the breeze just slightly, brushing her calves. Her hair was down for once, the gold hair clip gently holding one side back. She didn't wear pearls. She wore the smile she gave to people she trusted. Adrian took a slow breath, then walked toward her. "No one else matters," he said quietly. She nodded, unsure how to answer without shaking. He offered his arm. She took it. Inside, the venue glowed with low lights and white tablecloths. People were already watching. Celeste was seated at table 3, alone. Clara didn't look at her. Adrian pulled out Clara's chair at table 2, then sat beside her, not across. A waiter arrived with sparkling water. Another brought the amuse-bouche, tiny toasts with goat cheese and pomegranate. "Okay," Clara whispered after tasting one. "I don't know what I just ate, but I forgive it." Adrian laughed softly, and for a moment, the whole night felt manageable. Halfway through the main course, wild mushroom risotto, Clara noticed Celeste get up and make her way over. Adrian saw her coming too. Clara set down her fork. Celeste leaned in politely, smiling for the nearby eyes. "Adrian," she said smoothly, "may I borrow your guest for just a moment?" He looked at Clara. "That's up to her." Clara nodded, rising. They stepped a few feet away, just out of earshot. "I'm not here to make a scene," Celeste said under her breath. "Good," Clara replied calmly. "I just thought you should know." Celeste opened her clutch and pulled out her phone. This was sent to a few outlets an hour ago. She turned the screen. There it was, a headline on a gossip site. "CEO's Cinderella Assistant. Spark Scandal at Gala. Secret Past Revealed." Clara stood frozen, her reflection flickering in the dark glass wall beside her. The phone in Celeste's hand burned like it was aimed at her chest. "CEO's Cinderella Assistant. Spark Scandal at Gala. Secret Past Revealed." She didn't need to read the rest. Her mouth went dry, the blood drained from her face. Celeste's tone stayed smooth, like she was doing Clara a favor. They're framing it as a rags-to-riches fairy tale, but with enough bite to raise questions. How you got here? Why you're really at his table? What you're hiding? Clara kept her voice low. "Why are you doing this?" Celeste gave a faint smile. One that never touched her eyes. "I'm protecting the company from headlines we didn't approve. You're smart, Clara, but you're out of your depth. This isn't a charity gala for lost girls with sharp minds and soft smiles. This is business." With that, she turned and walked back toward her table, where her wine glass waited, untouched and crystal clear. Clara stared at her own hands, steady on the outside, shaking on the inside. She returned to table 2 slowly, breath tight. Adrian stood when she arrived. What did she say? Clara hesitated, then sat, smoothing her dress. "Nothing that deserves attention right now." He didn't push, not yet. But she could feel him watching her. Their desserts arrived, something fancy with hazelnut and spun sugar. But Clara couldn't taste anything. The room buzzed with quiet murmurs, eyes darting between her and Adrian like they already knew. After the final toast, the guests began to drift toward the balcony. Drawn to the skyline and camera flashes, Adrian leaned in. "Let's go!" She nodded, too numb to ask where. 20 minutes later, they sat in the back of a sleek town car. The city moved around them, blurred and glowing. Adrian loosened his cufflinks, but his eyes never left her. "Tell me." Clara looked out the window. "It's not even a real scandal, just something I tried to leave behind." "You don't have to tell me if you're not ready," he said. but she was. Maybe for the first time, she was. She turned, her voice quiet but steady. I was supposed to finish college. I had a scholarship, but my dad got sick and we didn't have insurance. So I dropped out and took 3 jobs. I cleaned offices at night, including Blakewood's old headquarters, actually. That's how I got the internship. I never told anyone. People assume I'm some soft-spoken grad with a perfect file, but I was just surviving. She met his eyes. I never expected to be seen, just paid, so I stayed small, invisible, safe. Adrian's jaw tightened, not in judgment, but in something else. Quiet anger on her behalf. You never needed to explain that to anyone, he said, least of all her. I know, but I hate that it's out now, like it's a stain instead of a story. Adrian leaned back. It's not a stain, it's your strength. They just don't know how to package it. His words felt like balm, like something inside her, something small and curled, was slowly beginning to sit up straight. The car pulled into a quiet street Clara knew well. Older brownstones, ivy creeping over brick. A tiny bookstore on the corner that always smelled like cinnamon. This isn't your building, she said. No, Adrian replied, stepping out and holding the door. It's yours. She frowned as she stepped onto the sidewalk. Why did we come here? I figured you needed food that didn't come with linen napkins and headlines. He pointed at the corner store. The lights were still on. 10 minutes later, they sat on a park bench with a paper bag between them, 2 turkey sandwiches, 1 bag of kettle chips, and 2 chocolate milks in glass bottles. Clara took a bite. Warm bread, real lettuce. Something she could chew without a press release. I haven't had a sandwich like this in a year, she murmured. I me neither, Adrian said, except mine came with bodyguards and organic pesto. She laughed. You're surprisingly normal for someone who owns half the skyline. I fake it well. They ate in silence for a bit, but it wasn't awkward. It was grounding, like 2 people on either side of a storm, sitting in a moment the world didn't control. After the last bite, Clara leaned back against the bench. The air was cool, the sky deep navy. You know they'll keep digging, she said softly, about me, about us. I know, Adrian replied, but I won't apologize for seeing you, and I won't ask you to shrink just to make them comfortable. Her throat tightened. You don't have to protect me. He turned to her, his voice quiet and firm. I'm not protecting you. I'm standing beside you. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. Then Clara reached into the bag, pulling out the last surprise, a crinkled pack of chocolate cookies. Dessert, she said with a small grin. He smiled. You remembered. I always do. She broke one in half, handed him a piece. He took it slowly, his fingers brushing hers. Warm, deliberate, just long enough to feel like something unspoken. And then her phone buzzed. Clara checked it and froze. A new message from her old college roommate. Someone she hadn't heard from in nearly 3 years. Hey, I think they just posted about you on the alumni board, and it's not good. Clara didn't move for several seconds. The message from her old roommate sat on her screen, pulsing like a heartbeat she didn't want to hear. Adrian noticed the shift in her face. What is it? She handed him the phone silently. He read the message, eyes narrowing. Alumni board? Clara nodded slowly. I was on a scholarship committee back then. We helped other students apply for grants. There was a letter, a fundraiser I wrote. Adrian raised a brow. It wasn't meant to be public. It was just to help raise emergency funds for my dad's surgery, she explained, her voice tight. I wrote about my family, how we couldn't afford things, about working night shifts. And now someone's pulled it out like it's proof I'm trying to trap a billionaire. Adrian's jaw clenched. That's disgusting. She bit her lip, staring at the sidewalk. I wasn't ashamed of my past until this week, she whispered. You shouldn't be, he said almost too quickly. But Clara wasn't listening anymore. She stood abruptly, brushing off her dress, as if it could help her gather what dignity she had left. "Can we go?" she asked. Adrian nodded, quiet now. Back in her apartment, she moved like a shadow. Her heels clicked on the hardwood floor, then landed softly on the rug beside her couch. She sat down slowly. Adrian stayed in the doorway, watching her. "You're not alone in this." "I feel like I am," she said, not cruelly, just honestly. "Because the people dragging me, they don't care who I really am. They just want me gone." She looked up at him. "And I don't want to be someone you have to explain." Adrian stepped closer. "You never were." But she was already retreating, not physically, but somewhere inside herself. "I need to sleep," she said, her voice small. "Or cry, or maybe both." He hesitated, then simply said, "Okay." And with a faint nod, he stepped back into the hallway. The door clicked softly behind him. That night, Clara didn't cry. She cleaned. She scrubbed her little kitchen, folded the same dish towel 3 times, rearranged her tea shelf. She couldn't fix the headlines, or the group chats, or the boardroom whispers, but she could realign her spoons. And then, while digging through an old file box under the sink, she found something. A letter, crumpled, soft at the corners. Her fundraiser letter. The same one that had clearly been leaked. She stared at her own handwriting. So much younger, desperate, honest. If I've learned anything this year, it's that strength isn't loud. It's what you do when no one's clapping. It's saying, "I'll keep going, even if it means walking into another shift with blisters. My father needs surgery. My family needs help. I'm not ashamed to ask, because love is worth the risk." Clara blinked fast. That girl, the one who wrote that, she was still in here. She hadn't disappeared behind HR emails and luxury guest lists. She folded the letter and held it against her chest. And somewhere between midnight and morning, she finally slept. The next day, Clara walked into the office early again. Same white blouse, same gray trousers. But something in her shoulders was different. Tasha blinked when she saw her. "You okay?" "No," Clara said, then smiled. "But I'm showing up anyway." She placed a thermos of coffee on Tasha's desk. "Peace offering for all the whispering I've put you through?" Tasha grinned, touched. "If this coffee comes with gossip, I forgive you twice." Clara laughed. "Deal." She sat down at her own desk, just as her inbox blinked. Subject: "An unexpected message for you. From Blakewood HR, Office of External Affairs." Frowning, Clara opened it. Inside was a screenshot, a comment thread from the alumni fundraiser page, but this time the tone had changed. The first comment was from a retired professor. "Clara Moretti's letter helped me donate during one of the hardest years of my life. She reminded me of my daughter. I'm proud to see where she is now." Another comment followed from a former classmate. "She worked harder than anyone I knew. That letter saved her dad's life and inspired half the scholarship club." And then her roommate, the one who had warned her. "I regret sending that screenshot. Clara was always the kindest person in the room. I was bitter and jealous, and I'm sorry." Clara covered her mouth, stunned. Beneath the comments, one last message from the HR assistant. "We thought you should see that not every story ends with shame. Some start with it, then become legacy." Just as she finished reading, her phone buzzed. A new calendar invite. Private lunch, rooftop, from Adrian Blakewood. Time: Adir 12ios, noon. No agenda, no subject line, just her name. She stared at the screen, then at the sky outside her window. Soft, cloudy, undecided. She didn't know what he wanted to say, but for the first time in days, she wasn't afraid to find out. Clara hesitated in front of the stairwell door. The rooftop wasn't just a location. It felt symbolic. She adjusted the strap of her tote and gripped the small fold-up umbrella inside. Her fingers were still cold from typing all morning, though the fall sun had shown up for the first time in days. The calendar invite from Adrian hadn't included any explanation, just her name, the word rooftop, and noon. No one else had been Fawad, no PR rep, no Margot. It wasn't a meeting, it wasn't a briefing, it was something else. She pushed open the door. The rooftop was smaller than she'd imagined, quiet, with just a few large potted plants, a glass railing, and the open sky stretched above the city's jagged line of rooftops and cranes. Adrian was already there. He stood by a small cafe-style table with two simple white plates. No staff, no setup, just him, placing what looked suspiciously like sandwiches onto napkins. He turned at the sound of the door. "Hey," he said, his voice noticeably softer than usual. "You brought sandwiches to a rooftop?" she asked, stepping out cautiously. "That's bold." He gave her that half-smile, the one he rarely showed anyone else. "They're the same kind we had on the park bench, from the deli." Clara walked toward the table, then paused. "Let me guess. No organic aioli this time?" He chuckled. "No garnish? Just sourdough and second chances." She sat down slowly, taking it all in, the skyline, the wind brushing her hair back, the quiet between them. There was something surreal about it. Here they were, a billionaire CEO and his assistant, eating turkey sandwiches at a rooftop table like two old friends stealing a lunch break. But it didn't feel like pretending. It felt like relief. Clara took a bite, still warm, still comforting. "I needed this," she said quietly. "I know," Adrian replied. They ate in silence for a few minutes, letting the wind and the distance from the office do what it was supposed to, loosen the knots, reset the breath. Eventually she looked up. "I read the comments on the alumni page." "So did I," he said, finishing a bite. "Some stories find their way back to truth. Not all of them, but some." She studied his face. "Why are you really doing this?" she asked. Adrian leaned back in his chair, his expression unreadable for a moment. Then he glanced toward the horizon, the wind lifting his sleeves slightly. "I think I spent so many years trying to be the man my father never was, that I forgot how to be anything else." Clara stayed still, surprised by the vulnerability in his voice. "My father was a public figure, just like me," Adrian continued, "but he was cold, transactional. When I took over Blakewood, people expected me to follow the same playbook." He turned to her. "But then you sent me a grocery list." Clara almost smiled, though her heart was tightening. "And it reminded me," Adrian said, voice quieter now, "that there are people in this building who are just surviving, carrying things, showing up without applause." She looked down. "I was just trying to buy shampoo and forget about life for 5 minutes." He laughed under his breath. "Exactly." They both took another bite. Then, after a moment, "I don't regret any of it," Clara admitted. "Even the mess, even the photo." Adrian tilted his head. "Why not?" "Because for the first time," she said slowly, "I feel like someone sees me, not just what I do, but me." He didn't respond immediately. Instead, he reached into the brown paper bag between them and pulled out something wrapped in a napkin. A cookie. "Dessert," he said, offering it like a peace treaty. "I saved the last one." Clara took it gently, trying not to show how much it moved her. "You remembered?" "I always do," Adrian said. They shared it, splitting it right down the middle, like the universe had planned it that way. The moment slowed. Adrian's fingers brushed hers as he handed over her half. Warm, deliberate, lingering, not by accident, and then he inhaled deeply, as though gathering courage. "There's something I've been meaning to tell you." Clara looked up, the cookie halfway to her lips. "What is it?" Adrian opened his mouth, then paused. Closed it. Something flickered across his face. Vulnerability, uncertainty. But before he could speak, the rooftop door creaked open behind them. Margot stepped out, umbrella in one hand, phone in the other. "Sorry, sir. Legal's requesting you downstairs. It's about the zoning issue with the Bryant property. They say it can't wait." Adrian turned slightly, jaw tight. "Of course it can't." He glanced back at Clara, something unfinished in his gaze. "I'll be back," he said. She nodded, watching him leave, the silence folding back in around her like a coat she hadn't realized she missed. She sat there a while, alone on the rooftop, cookie crumb between her fingers. City air thick with something unspoken. It began to drizzle. Light, delicate rain, the kind that didn't quite soak, just kissed your hair and reminded you that even silence has texture. Clara pulled out her umbrella and propped it over her shoulder, not yet ready to go back downstairs. She checked her phone. One message from Tasha. "Clara, someone took a picture of you and Adrian on the rooftop. It's already on Twitter. Your rooftop romance is trending." Rooftop romance. Clara stared at the trending tab like it was a countdown clock. The photo was flattering. That was the worst part. It showed her laughing. Eyes closed, umbrella tilted just slightly. Adrian beside her, not touching her, not even looking directly at her, but the softness in his posture, the way his body leaned slightly toward hers. It was undeniable. They looked like the ending of a movie. But this wasn't a movie. This was real life. Where office romances ended careers, where photos didn't need context to cost you your job. Her phone buzzed non-stop. She muted everything. Even Tasha, who had already sent 4 panic texts and a gif of a paper bag being hyperventilated into. Clara stood from the rooftop table, brushed cookie crumbs from her lap, and walked slowly toward the stairwell. Her legs felt disconnected from her body. Her thoughts refused to form straight lines. She barely registered the faces that turned as she stepped into the 14th floor. Eyes flicking up from screens, conversations cutting short, tension tightening like elastic between cubicles. Back at her desk, Tasha spun around instantly. "I tried to warn you," she whispered. "They're calling an emergency board meeting, like everyone's nervous, HR, legal, even finance." Clara sat, stunned. "It's just a photo." Tasha gave her a look. "A photo of you and Adrian Blakewood on a private rooftop lunch under one umbrella, looking like the next royal couple." Clara opened her mouth someday and then stopped. There was no use denying it. The image said more than any email could. She took a deep breath. "Okay, if they call me in, I'll explain." Tasha blinked. "Explain what?" "That I didn't do anything wrong." Tasha's face softened. "No, you didn't." For a moment, they just sat in the chaos, finding stillness together in the eye of the storm. Then Clara opened her drawer and pulled out a pen. "If I'm going down, I want to write the words myself." 15 minutes later, Clara was summoned. Not by email, by Celeste Hargrove herself. She stood in the corridor like a perfectly tailored omen. "Come with me," she said. "They're waiting." Clara followed down the long, echoing corridor toward the executive wing, past glass doors that had never opened for her. Celeste didn't speak until they stopped in front of the boardroom. "You'll be asked direct questions," she said, smoothing her blouse. "Answer them professionally, stick to facts, don't make it personal." Clara looked at her calmly. "I'm not ashamed of anything I've done, but thank you for the advice." Celeste's eyes narrowed just slightly. The doors opened. The boardroom was vast and intimidating. Walls of glass, 12 high-backed chairs, and a long walnut table that probably cost more than Clara's entire degree. Adrian wasn't there. The CEO seat sat empty. Clara's heart sank. One of the senior board members, a silver-haired woman named Lillian Kerr, gestured for her to sit. "Miss Moretti," she said, "we appreciate you joining us." Clara nodded. "Of course." Lillian folded her hands. "I'll be direct. There is now public speculation about your relationship with Mr. Blakewood. A photo surfaced this morning. Are you involved with him romantically?" Clara's fingers curled slightly in her lap. "No, we are not involved romantically. We had a meal." "A private meal, yes, but nothing inappropriate took place." "Are you aware of the policy regarding personal relationships within leadership and support staff?" Yes, Clara said, and I have not violated any of them. Someone across the table, a man Clara didn't recognize, muttered, "You may not have yet." She looked up. "Excuse me?" The man raised an eyebrow. "It's not a crime to be ambitious, Miss Moretti." The implication hung in the air. Clara didn't flinch. "I've worked here for 2 years," she said, voice clear. "I've taken the early shifts no one wanted. I've submitted every report on time. I've supported 5 different team leads and never once asked for more than what I earned. I didn't ask for a headline. I didn't ask for a hashtag. And I certainly didn't ask to be insulted for sharing an umbrella." Silence. Lillian Kerr studied her carefully, then glanced at the empty chair at the head of the table. "Where is Mr. Blakewood?" someone asked. Almost on cue, the door opened. Adrian stepped inside, his presence commanding even without a word. He wore a charcoal suit, no tie, hair slightly wind-tousled. But his expression was calm. "Apologies for the delay," he said. He looked directly at Clara, then turned to the board. "If you have questions about my personal conduct, you direct them to me." The room stilled. Lillian Kerr cleared her throat. "We've asked Miss Moretti if she's involved in a personal relationship with you. She's denied it. We expect the same answer from you." Adrian looked at the room, his face unreadable. Then he spoke, slow and deliberate. "Clara Moretti is not my romantic partner. She is my employee." Clara's stomach dropped, not at the words, but at the coldness of them. Adrian continued, "However, I care deeply about her well-being, and I take full responsibility for the setting that led to this photo. I invited her to lunch. I chose the rooftop. Any consequences fall on me." The room murmured again. "Are you denying any feelings exist between you?" Lillian asked. Adrian paused, and that pause was too long. Clara felt her breath catch. Finally he said, "That's not a question I'm required to answer." Lillian nodded slowly. "Very well. I believe we're done here for now." Clara stood, barely holding her posture steady. As she turned to leave, Adrian's voice followed her. Low, meant only for her. "Clara, wait." She paused in the doorway. "I need to talk to you, privately." Clara didn't respond right away. She stood just inside the boardroom doorway, the hum of whispers still lingering behind her like static. Adrian's voice had been quiet, too quiet to carry across the long table, but not too quiet for her. "Clara, wait," he'd said. Her feet moved before her mind could catch up. She didn't look back. She heard him fall into step beside her as they left the corridor. They didn't speak, not in the elevator, the upsu, not as they stepped through the building lobby, not when the crisp outside air greeted them like an exhale. The silence between them wasn't cold. It was heavy, not with anger, but with something that had gone unsaid too long. She stopped at the corner. "My place is a 10-minute walk." Adrian nodded. "Lead the way." Her apartment smelled faintly of mint tea and something warm she'd forgotten she'd cooked. A sweater hung over the back of a chair. A worn paperback sat open on the coffee table, spine cracked from love. Adrian stepped inside like someone visiting a chapel, reverent, quiet, slightly out of place in his suit. She dropped her bag by the door, then moved into the kitchen. "I have soup, leftover lentils. It's not boardroom approved, but it's real food." Adrian stood in the doorway. "That sounds perfect." She watched him for a second, the way he rolled his sleeves up just a little higher, the way he took in the room like he didn't want to miss any part of her life. "I didn't invite you here to impress you," she said, setting 2 mismatched bowls on the counter. "I don't have a view. My wine glasses don't match. I didn't clean the floor this week." "Good," he said gently, "because I didn't come to be impressed." She ladled the soup slowly, carrots, garlic, lentils, parsley she'd chopped too finely. The spoon trembled just a little in her hand. They sat at her small kitchen table, knees nearly brushing, and ate in silence for the first few minutes. The soup was hearty, Simple. The kind you cook when you're tired but still want to feel human. Adrian finally spoke, voice low. This is better than anything from the gala, Clara smiled faintly. Because it came with cracked pepper and unresolved tension? He chuckled. Because it tastes like something made for a person, not a guest list. She looked at him carefully. Why did you ask to talk? He set his spoon down. Because I couldn't let the board's version of the story be the last one you heard. Her heart beat faster. I didn't lie, he said. You're not my romantic partner, not officially, but it wasn't the whole truth either. He leaned forward, elbows resting gently on the edge of her table. His voice was steady, but softer than she'd ever heard. Clara, I care about you. More than I should, more than the board would ever find acceptable, and probably more than I have the right to. She stayed very still. I didn't say anything before, he continued, because I didn't want you to think it was power talking. Or gratitude, or guilt, Clara swallowed. And now? Now I know it's none of those things. It's just you with your quiet determination and the grocery lists and the way you talk to people like they matter. You reminded me I'm not just a title, I'm still a man who hasn't felt much of anything real in years. His words weren't rehearsed. They were too unpolished, too raw. Clara's throat tightened. She looked down at her hands, then up again. I don't want to be someone you choose to feel better about yourself. You're not, he said immediately. You're someone I want to choose because being around you makes me better. The silence that followed stretched, not awkward, but charged. You know this could ruin things, Clara said quietly. For me, for you. I do. She looked at him, her voice barely above a whisper. Then why say anything at all? Because pretending I didn't feel this way was ruining something too. The wind rattled gently against her windows. Rain had started, just a misting. Soft and slow. Adrian stood, walked around the table. He didn't touch her. Not yet. Can I? He asked, voice gentler than she'd ever heard. She nodded slowly. He reached for her hand, fingers brushing hers, warm and uncertain. It wasn't a kiss, it wasn't a confession with fireworks, it was a moment. A question between hands, a closeness that asked, can this be ours? Clara closed her eyes, her heart fluttered. Her body leaned just slightly toward his. Then, her phone buzzed, once, then again. She let go of his hand reluctantly, picked it up from the counter. Her eyes skimmed the screen, and her breath hitched. From legalblakewoodco.com. Subject, urgent, immediate disclosure required. Her eyes kept reading, even as her stomach turned cold. All employees currently subject to media exposure due to personal relationships involving executive leadership must disclose the nature and status of said relationships. Failure to do so will result in disciplinary action up to and including termination. Clara looked up. They're forcing disclosure. Adrian read the screen over her shoulder, his expression hardening. And if we don't? He asked. She stared at him. Not the CEO, not the man in the suit, but Adrian. Just Adrian. If we don't, she said slowly, they'll fire me. Clara sat back down slowly, her phone still glowing between her fingers. Adrian stayed standing, eyes on the message. Failure to disclose may result in disciplinary action up to and including termination. A beat of silence passed. Then another. Then Clara laughed. It wasn't bitter or broken. It was low and tired and honest. Adrian looked at her. What's funny? She turned the phone off, exhaled. I've spent the last 3 years terrified of being invisible, and now the worst thing that could happen is that I'm seen too clearly. He didn't smile. This isn't fair. No, Clara agreed. It's not. She stood, crossing the kitchen to rinse their soup bowls. She wasn't angry. She was just done with being afraid. I know who I am, she said over the sound of running water, and I've worked too hard to be reduced to someone's rumor. Adrian moved beside her. taking a towel from the rack and drying the bowls without asking. The movement was simple, domestic, almost protective. "You don't have to go through this alone," he said. Clara looked at him, heart steady. "Then say it. Say it in the open. Say it to the board. Say it to HR. Say it to me." He held her gaze. "I care about you, Clara," he said, no hesitation now. "And I want something real with you, not hidden, not whispered about, but something that matters. In daylight." A silence passed between them, not of doubt, but of acceptance. Then, finally, she nodded, "Then let's tell them, together." The next morning, Clara didn't wear gray. She wore navy blue, the same dress from the gala, this time with a soft cardigan, and her hair pinned loosely back with the gold leaf clip Adrian had given her. No hiding, no apologies. She didn't take the elevator to the 14th floor. She went straight to the 15th. When Margot blinked up at her, Clara offered a calm smile. "Is the board meeting still in session?" Margot nodded slowly, stunned. "Yes, but—" Clara didn't wait. She opened the doors herself. The boardroom was full. Celeste sat near the end of the table, arms crossed. Lillian Kerr's expression was unreadable. Adrian was already there, standing, waiting. He looked at Clara as she entered, and nodded just once. Clara stepped up beside him, feeling every eye in the room on her. "I understand this meeting concerns our professional relationship," Adrian said. Lillian folded her hands. "It does. We've received multiple media queries, and HR has issued formal notice regarding disclosure requirements." "Then allow me to be clear," Adrian said. "Clara and I are not in a romantic relationship, not yet." Gasps, small ones, controlled, corporate. "But I hope we will be." He turned to Clara fully in front of them all. "I care about her. Not because she sent me the wrong email, not because of anything you've read online, but because she reminds me what integrity looks like when no one's watching." Clara blinked back, a sting in her eyes. She didn't expect him to speak like that, not in front of these people, and still they waited. For her, Clara stepped forward. "I didn't ask for any of this," she said, "but I'm not ashamed of it, or of myself. I've worked hard. I've never crossed a line. I've never expected special treatment." She looked directly at Celeste, whose eyes narrowed, lips tight. "And I will no longer apologize for being respected by someone who saw past my job title." There was silence. It was Lillian who finally spoke. "Thank you both. We'll review HR's recommendations." But it wasn't a dismissal. It was the kind of reply people gave when they'd already made a decision, but weren't ready to admit they'd been wrong. As Clara and Adrian stepped out together, Celeste rose. "Clara," she said coolly. "A word?" Adrian stopped, but Clara touched his arm. "It's okay." He gave her one last look, then left the room. Celeste closed the door behind them. For a moment she said nothing. Then, "You're clever. I underestimated that." Clara folded her arms. "Thank you." Celeste studied her. "This won't be easy. This won't. The media will drag it out. There'll be internal whispering for months." "I know." "And you're still choosing it?" Clara's voice was calm. "I'm not choosing gossip. I'm choosing myself. And I'm choosing not to disappear." Celeste stared at her a moment longer, then gave the smallest nod. "Then I hope—" "For your sake, it's worth it." Clara tilted her head. "I already know it is." Later that evening, Clara sat in her apartment alone. She didn't expect a celebration, but she didn't expect the peace either. She made toast. The good kind, with too much butter and just enough crunch. She poured tea. Chamomile, no sugar. And as she curled up on the couch, her phone buzzed. New message. Adrian Blakewood. "I just told my mother about you. She asked if you were the one who reminded me how to live. I told her yes. Dinner tomorrow? Real food, real seats, no cameras. I'll pick you up at 7. Clara stared at the screen. Heartful? Not just with butterflies, but with something firmer, solid, steady. And then another buzz. An email from PR, blakewoodfoundation.org. Subject, public response draft, Clara Moretti story. She opened it, and at the top was the first line of the draft press statement. This is not a scandal. It's a story about honesty, dignity, and two people who chose truth over perception. She smiled. And yet, just as she set the phone down, her doorbell rang. Not a buzz, not a knock, a doorbell. Clara stood slowly, opened the door. And there, on the other side, stood a woman she hadn't seen in over a decade. "Clara?" the woman said, voice shaking. It took a second for her to place the face. And then it landed like a wave. Her mother. Clara stood in the doorway, frozen. The woman standing on the other side hadn't aged so much as softened, like time had gently rearranged her edges without asking permission. Her hair was pulled back in the same low bun she used to wear on Sundays. The cardigan was old, faded, familiar. "Mom?" Clara's voice cracked. "I wasn't sure you'd open the door," her mother said, clutching her purse like it held a second chance. "But I couldn't not come." Clara stepped aside silently. She hadn't seen her mother in 9 years, not since the day she walked out during the worst of her father's illness, overwhelmed, unreachable, unable to stay. Clara had built her life in the silence that followed. They sat in the kitchen, no tears yet, just quiet. The kind of quiet that pressed gently against both of them. Like a question. "I saw your name in the news," her mother finally said. "They made it sound like a scandal, but I saw your eyes. You looked calm." Clara didn't speak. She watched the woman who'd raised her, flawed, broken, trying, hold her mug like she was scared it might shatter. "I left," her mother whispered. "When you needed me most. And then you stopped calling. And I thought maybe you were better without me." Clara looked down. "I was never better without you. I just learned how to survive without waiting." A long silence stretched between them. Then her mother did something Clara didn't expect. She reached into her bag and pulled out a tiny gift box. Inside it was a pearl hair clip, old-fashioned, elegant, clearly once hers. "I kept this for you, for when you forgave me." Clara's eyes stung. It wasn't the clip. It wasn't the gesture. It was being seen after all this time. "I don't know if I've forgiven everything," Clara said honestly, "but I think I can forgive this." Her mother nodded. "That's more than I hoped for." They ate toast. Nothing fancy. Just two women at a kitchen table, rebuilding something. Clara didn't tell her everything, not yet. But she told her enough. That she had fought hard for her place, that she'd met someone kind, that she wasn't afraid anymore. And when her mother left an hour later, Clara stood at the door for a long time, the pearl clip in one hand, the gold one still in her hair. Two pieces of herself, both real, both true. At 7 sharp, there was another knock. But this time, Clara was ready. She opened the door to Adrian. No suit, no tie, just a soft navy sweater and dark jeans, holding a brown paper bag that smelled faintly of herbs and warm bread. "You cooked?" she teased, stepping aside. "I watched someone on YouTube cook," he said. "Does that count?" They set the table together, roasted vegetables, grilled salmon, a loaf of sourdough that was slightly burned on one edge. Clara smiled. "You even char things like a real person." "I try." They sat, close but unhurried. They talked, not about the board or Celeste or even HR. They talked about travel, about music, about why neither of them ever finished books they started in November. Halfway through dessert, a chocolate tart that leaned more attempt than recipe, Adrian reached into his coat pocket. "I have something for you." Clara tilted her head. "If it's another cookie, you win." He pulled out a folded piece of paper. She unfolded it, read, blinked. It was a formal letter, signed by Adrian, addressed to Blakewood & Co.'s Board of Directors. "Effective immediately, I will be transitioning Clara Moretti from her current assistant role into a new advisory position within the Blakewood Foundation. reporting to the board and not directly to me. This structure allows for transparency, ethical clarity, and continued growth without compromising the values we hold." Clara stared at the signature, then at him. "You're moving me?" "I'm promoting you," he said, "because you've outgrown the role you were in. Because you deserve more than being someone's assistant forever. But the optics will survive," he said gently, "because this isn't about saving face. It's about doing the right thing." She set the letter down carefully. "I don't want it just because you care about me," she said. "You're not getting it because I care about you," he said. "You're getting it because you earned it before I ever knew your favorite shampoo." Tears slipped down her cheek before she could stop them. "I'm not used to people choosing me and doing the right thing." "Get used to it," he said softly. "I plan to keep doing both." He reached for her hand. She let him. And this time, when he leaned in, slow, warm, steady, she didn't hesitate. Their kiss was not rushed, not stolen. It was earned, and it tasted like the first breath after holding it too long. 1 week later, Clara walked into the Blakewood Foundation's offices for her first day in her new role. The team had left a small bouquet on her desk, daisies and eucalyptus, with a card that read, "Welcome home." She sat down, adjusted her chair, and clipped back her hair with the gold leaf clip, not to hide, but to shine. That morning, the company released a statement. No drama, no apology, just this. Some stories begin with mistakes, others begin with courage. Ours began with a list, and ended with respect, love, and the belief that truth is always worth sharing. 6 months later, at the edge of a quiet park in spring, Adrian passed Clara a folded note as they sat on a bench. Inside, scribbled in his handwriting, "Want to build a life list with me?" She smiled and took the pen from his hand. The end. What did you think? Would you have made the same choice Clara did? Rate the story from 0 to 10, and don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe if you want more modern fairy tales like this one. Until next time, see you in the next story.